So much for coming along to this. It is lovely to have you here for this session. And I feel particularly honoured by the fact that you've picked this session when there is so much else that's really good in the programme. I would understand if you wanted to move. No? Okay, right. So I love being able to say this now. The previous Department for Education had there in its guidance issued to schools, colleges, the education system about a year ago now, and it was really good that they pivoted and thought, what does AI mean in the context of education? That education sector needs to teach students how to use emerging technology, such as generative AI, safely and appropriately. And I think that's a really positive statement from the then department as to this should be something that students are learning how to do. This isn't the same as statutory national curriculum, but it is a very strong encouragement from the DFE that this ought to be part of what's happening in school. You have challenges if you're working at primary. Primary teachers, put your hand up, please. Because the tools that we would want them to use aren't available for under 13s. And even in secondary, there's a parental consent thing there. Neil, you're more than welcome to take pictures of the slides. They are all online, and I hope that I'll be able to make the tape available. If you want me to pose in front of any of them, do say. That's fine. And then there's a really nice list there of, look, a lot of this you are already doing in school. So there's stuff that we're already teaching around this. And, much of this is based on current national curriculum. Talking of which, AI in the English computing curriculum, there is talk of a curriculum review. What would you put on there? And if anybody were to start getting to grips with what we put into a section that might well be still labelled computing, I think we would have to acknowledge that some explicit mention of artificial intelligence would be on any revision of that now. But look, we did a good job, didn't we? There in the overarching aims for national curriculum, evaluate and apply IT, including new or unfamiliar technologies, analytically to solve problems. So, when this was written, large language models weren't really even a glimmer in anybody's eye, but being able to, evaluate and apply things like large language models, particularly to solving problems, is part and parcel of what we're aiming to do with computing education. 5 to 7-year-olds, 2 primary colleagues in the room there, you need to be teaching kids about these things because at Key Stage 1 on the programme of study is recognise common uses of IT beyond school. And that's likely to include now the smart speakers in their bedrooms. That's likely to include all of what we can do with ChatGPT and other large language models. There are other points of contact later on. When we drafted the computing curriculum, which took effect nearly 10 years ago now, we had this 3-layer model of it. Royal Society put this in terms of computer science and information technology and digital literacy. Nobody's really quite clear about the difference between IT and digital literacy even now. Much happier to think of this as foundations, applications, implications. And that model carries over when we start thinking about AI education. That how does this work ought to be something which we're covering as part of computer science lessons in school, I think. How can it be used is something which matters to you as teachers because you're very busy people and getting the AIs to help with some of that workload, not a bad idea. And your pupils are likely to be using this in some ways, sometimes for good. I suspect very often for ill, but, those stories we will do off the record. And then, what does all this mean? Big section there about the ethical implications, deeper than ethical. This is deep philosophical implications for us as individuals, for society, and, if I can be very grand here to say civilization, what does all this mean? Let's start at the beginning there with the foundations aspect of this. So if you're teaching like Key Stage 3, some Key Stage 4 computing, you have this model of what a computer is. It accepts input, processes that according to a stored program, produces output. Put your hand up, please, if you have taught that recently. Very good, well done. It's on the spec. You have to do these things, yeah? But look, it's kind of wrong now, isn't it? This hardwired link between the input and output. It's not lots of if statements that are going on there, is it? It's not. If this is the input, produce this output. What the model is closer to now, I think we ought to teach this, is the input and the output are linked by some sort of model determined by, well, not even the coder, determined by the machine learning algorithm that was selected there. and fundamentally determined by the data on which that algorithm has been trained. So whilst on this occasion, debugging things, got the wrong output, that involves looking through your program and seeing where the mistakes are. This is much harder in a machine learning, in an AI age, where did you get the algorithm choice right? Would there have been a better algorithm that you could have chosen? And really importantly, did you train it with actually the data that you should have trained it with, the data that is representative of the world as it is, or the world as we would want it to be? That's a deep question, much harder than I've missed out a colon in this, so it's produced the wrong output. Okay, I'll give you a moment to copy down the detail from the slide. No, okay, so you've got this thing going on. If you are used to this with your phones, more importantly for us, your pupils are used to this with their phones or their tablets. Anybody teaching in a school that's gone one-to-one with iPads as the me. So when they write, oh, I love the expression, sorry, need a photo of that. When they are writing or essays on the iPad, you've watched what? They start off fine, but then it will suggest these are the 3 words for you to carry on with. You pick one of those words, it then selects. This is not generative AI and large language models, the mediums. How people, after 2 or 3, that is. And we're reasonably familiar with this. If you want to do lovely unplugged activities, give them cards with lots of 3-word text messages on and ask them to work out the conditional probability of the 3rd word given the first 2 words. You've got an idea then of it is choosing based on the data that it has seen as to what word to suggest next. Yeah, so we can start building up an understanding of a stochastic language model there. We can go further because we can write Python code. Here's one we prepared earlier. Don't do live coding like this in front of an audience. So this is using Python's natural language toolkit. I've downloaded the text of 3 Jane Austen novels on which to train a very small language model. And on this bit of code here, I say, look, show me just the first line of that. Emma by Jane Austen, 1816. Here, this is not difficult code. What I'm saying is, look at all 3-word combinations in that text. Given the first 2 words, the 3rd word is your dictionary key there, and add 1 to that each time you see a particular 3rd word. So we're building up, for the first 2 words, what is the 3rd word likely to be? And then I do some adjustment at the end to get that down to probabilities in a 0-1 range. So what we can do now is say, if Jane Austen has these 2 words, what's the word that comes next in those 3 novels? So, okay, hopefully you didn't see that before it's too late. If she starts with I am, what word would Jane Austen use next after I am? I'm extremely, could be, I love that. I try not to use adverbs very much in my writing. Generally, I try not to use adverbs very much, but, sometimes it happens. It turns out that Austen's favourite word after I am in those 3 novels was I am sure. And then we have I am not, I am very, I am afraid. We can scroll down further, and I'm hoping extremely will get onto the list. Exceedingly, that's another adverb, isn't it? Further up, thank you. Okay. Can't see because I'm too close. Extremely comes up less than 1% of the time, but it's on the list, okay? So we could do that. That was I am. What about he is? Is that going to be sure as well? Does it matter? He is a, he is very comes up. He is as, he is not, he is just. What about she is? Does gender determine her choice of the 3rd word? Oh, she is pretty at 4% of the time. That wasn't on the he is words, was it? So, we've got how Austen uses language. And those of you who are excited about recursion, hands up who's excited about recursion. Okay, that's not typical of the population, but it's good to see. Okay, see where we're heading with it. If I know the 1st and 2nd word, I can guess the 3rd word. From the 2nd and 3rd word, the 4th word. From the 3rd and 4th word, I could go on, but you've got the pattern there. So let's have a go at that. This is using those random probability distributions at each point. Yeah, so roll the dice, pick the thing according to the probability law, and keep doing that. And we get, I'm sure he was talking about she must submit to. I'm sure he is a very rich gentleman, and Edward's wishes, and trying not the smallest emotion, her piece is cut up. It's not Jane Austen. To be honest, folks, it's not even Bridgerton. But, there is a sense in which it is using language in that sort of Austen-like way. Nobody is going to get excited by an AI that does this as a way of generating Jane Austen. So how do we get from this to the utterly astonishing large language model? Well, typically, you're going to train it on more than just 3 works. You're going to use as many books, as many web pages as you can find. And typically, you're not just going to look at the 2 previous words. It's easy for me to code that in Python and run that here. But if you look at all of the previous words, all of the tokens in the prompt, and that it's used so far, what now is the next word to use? I think I have an illustration of that coming up. Yeah. So back in the day, before they released ChatGPT, there was the GPT playground where you could use it as a completer for you. So I would start with, here are 5 ways in which AI can be used to provide access to the curriculum. And then it would go on and complete my thought for me. We get into line 2 here, machine learning. Machine learning algorithms can be used to the most likely token is identify. But it rolled its random dice and got something which wasn't in that top 25% of the scores, and so went with analyze then. Once it's put analyze down, analyze what? Analyze student performance data, yay! And it keeps doing that until it's written something which makes sense or maybe doesn't make sense. There will be people in the room who have used the phrase, bad choices have consequence. And the same applies to the AIs here. If it rolls the dice and gets a low number, metaphorically, and puts an utterly weird word down, it has to live with the consequence of that for all of the tokens that follow. Once it's chosen that, the rest of the tokens are determined by the probability distribution from that and all of the things before it. And thus hallucination is kind of baked into the system there, isn't it? Once it's said something weird, it's got to kind of back up its argument for the weird thing that it has said. It's not trying to deceive you, it's not lying, but it isn't necessarily representing the world that is out there. What was it trained on? Put your hand up, please, if you have an account on Reddit and are willing to admit to it in public. That's good. Keep your hand up, please, if you've posted content onto Reddit. Links onto Reddit. Okay, so none of us contributed to the training mix, yeah? Those folks who have posted links to other pages into Reddit, that became part of web text too in there. And that was a really big part of the training mix for GPT-3. You as a school teacher might wonder, are the pages that people link to from Reddit really the sort of content that I want my pupils using as their model for language and all of that? You might have your doubts. It paid a lot of attention to Wikipedia. It read Wikipedia like 3.5 times. So Wikipedia, again, a big part of the training mix. Some of you will remember the days when you used to tell children, you cannot trust Wikipedia, it's made up by people. Turns out, in retrospect, made up by people is a really big plus point. We're happy with that. And then books 1 and books 2. It's read loads of books. Weirdly, OpenAI didn't say what the books were. I'm told that there are some good books and others which are less good. Anyhow, that was GPT-3, and they told us how the training mix was. There's a little bit more to it than what I've just said. There was human intervention with this. So there was modeling what a good response looks like. There was saying this is a better response than that. And there is ongoing training. Sometimes you see this thumbs up, thumbs down, or it might say, is this a better response than that? And so they're continuing to modify the weights in the language model. They're not, as far as I'm aware, using your prompts to rebuild the language model. There will be new language models coming, but they're very protective of the model itself and don't want us users going in and polluting what it's been trained on just yet. Okay, the new version, which is utterly awesome, GPT-4, on the technical paper for this, they say this report contains no details about the architecture, model size, hardware, training compute, dataset construction, training method, or similar. This is an organization called OpenAI. The extent to which they're being open about the AI, I mean, sound commercial reasons, but be aware that these are commercial reasons. The companies that have made these products are not doing it for the good of society as the bottom line. They are doing this to increase shareholder or stakeholder value. That takes me to 15 minutes and exactly the time to move on to the next bit. I'm happy to move on, but if you want to argue with me now or just raise any questions or concerns, we could do that briefly now before I get stuck into the next bit. I'll move on. Okay, right, so what does this all mean for us as school teachers? Right. So again, the previous government said that teacher workload is an important issue and we are committed to helping teachers spend less time on non-pupil facing activities. And we saw so much evidence of that from the previous government, of how much they had done to try and reduce teacher. Never mind, I'll move on. Okay, so there's a thing there about knowledge rich still matters. Being able to write a good prompt, being able to make sense of the prompt requires understanding the domain. And I think they're right to do so. But there is that encouragement there that if you can use this to save some of your time, then use this to save some of your time. So you can spend more time working with the kids. And that seems to me a sensible thing to do. So there are an amazing portfolio of tools out there. John Chips, Mr. P have got TeachMate AI, which is right, which is this lovely tile-based interface to this. So, John Chips is around at the conference. Ask him how the magic works. My understanding is you click on the tile, provide a few parameters, and then it goes and sends a query off to a large language model, I think GPT-4, takes that response and presents it to you. So it's acting as the interface between the teacher and the language model. I may be wrong. There's some lovely ideas for the things that you could do with this. Could use it to make a lesson plan, could use it to write a letter, make your medium-term plan, and so on. I think, folks, you're pretty good at working with the language interface of giving your own prompt into the language model and making sense of its response. But the tile-based interfaces are around. The DfE did a consultation last summer when many school teachers have little better to do than to respond to DfE consultations. And they asked, okay, it's all right. You can see me, you can see the slides, you kind of see me. They asked about how are teachers already using this? And you've got the list of 7 things as the bullet points there on the slide. There's also stuff at the bottom about others uses not covered in the themes using generative AI to proofread, edit, or improve written content. I do that a lot. So if somebody asks me to write something, I will do that generally. I'll write the thing, and then what I do now is send it to ChatGPT to say, what have I missed out? Are there any mistakes in here? How could I improve this? And listening to those ideas, I find very helpful. I have spoken to senior people working in higher education who do it the other way around. So you get the machine to do the first 60% of the work, and then they come in and just tidy that up a bit and give it their own particular take on this. CAS, working with TeacherTap, recently done the survey of all teachers, not just us computing teachers, 5,000 odd of them in the sample there. I don't know, are you surprised by this date? I think I was really surprised that 45% of their samples, big sample, weren't already using this routinely. And not open to it, 19%, and I would see myself very much in this 8% thing, 24% recent users. I'm really surprised that this hasn't captured the imagination of our colleagues elsewhere in the profession as it perhaps has done us. So again, what are they afraid of? Okay, so there was this whole thing at the beginning of you cannot trust what it says, and we know about hallucination. And what if it says something and I'm held to account for it? A little bit of reading what it said before you hand it in, I guess, to be part of that. That's really interesting that somehow has captured, that's stuck in teachers' brains about it just makes stuff up. Yes, yeah. Oh, yes. And, if all you do is write me a lesson plan on digital piracy, it's not going to be brilliant. It's all right, But then when you start into a dialogue with the machine, it will get better and better at these things. Yes, sir. I am paying $20 a month at the moment. Stop. A couple of days time because I'm not going to need it over the summer. I really don't think it's summer. But yeah, but the free versions are really very, very good. So later on, I'll show you Claude 3, Gemini. I don't. I'm getting my 20. Again, that might be the teachers to pay for, and that perhaps puts some off another expense for work not paid for by work. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Well, maybe, maybe, if you're still teaching great lessons and still a brilliant teacher with the kids in the room, then there is an argument here. There's a lovely Douglas Adams quote about any technology that's invented after I get to the age of 35 is against the laws of nature. And, I kind of feel like this with virtual reality headsets and to some extent 3D printing. But no, not this. This is a different story. Neil, yeah. Yeah. Ooh. Right. Hmm. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. The teacher see this as cheating. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I could see that. I could see that. Yeah. And this is subtle in my context at Roehampton. My trainees using this to do lesson plans for them. It's okay. I'd rather they use this than stayed up ludicrous hours on a Sunday evening writing lesson plans, but I would much rather they edited the lesson plan before they got into the room. My students using this to write their essays, not a good idea. They will find themselves invited to a meeting and not offered a coffee if that happens, I can tell you. Okay, so into this data which Neil talks has helped commission, we have what are you doing with this? And creating quizzes, that ability to produce very, very quickly multiple choice assessment items or open answer assessment quizzes and put those in front of the children. You know what you want to teach. You've got your learning objectives pinned down. It would be a very good idea to find some way of checking whether the kids have learnt those things. This is a really easy way to produce assessment. The more guidance you give it, the better those quizzes will be. Creating test questions, pretty much the same thing in there. Lesson planning, really interesting. Neil, does the data tell you whether this was higher at primary than second? No, because I've heard folks from TeacherTapp saying primary teachers really like it for lesson planning because it's kind of what they like doing with lesson plans, is meeting their year 4 colleagues and sitting around and saying, what shall we do? And entering into a dialogue to come up with a good lesson is a very primary school way of approaching planning a new unit. And it does that. It is very happy to enter into a dialogue there. The letters to parents, I'm worried about this. It's a time-saving thing, but sooner or later, if you keep saying moreover and delve in your letters home, they will know. There's the school report thing I hope, come to. So if I'm training folks about this with more than like quarter of an hour of this bit, we'll take a topic and do this live. I've got a worked example which I'm going to share with you. So I've asked it to produce me some resources and planning around digital piracy. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact it does not pick up on the irony of what is essentially a digital pirate being asked to talk about digital piracy here. I'm working on the principle nobody knows more about digital piracy than a generative AI does. So give me some text suitable for an 11-year-old. It's fine. There's nothing wrong in that, I don't think. Sorry, I'm in danger that I've actually missed something kind of important from that. You are an expert teacher of computer science working in an English secondary school. Your school uses the I do, we do, you do structure. Write me a lesson plan for an engaging, good luck, year 8 lesson on digital piracy. It does it, okay? I don't think it's actually that engaging. Telling it that this is an expert teacher of computer science doesn't, in my experience, produce a better plan than telling it you're a teacher of computer science. I haven't yet done the experiment of you're a really, really rubbish teacher of computer science, but that's left as an exercise for you. What does it go on and do? Assessment. Participation in discussions and group activities, quality of reflective writing and understanding shown in the essay, creativity and accuracy in the digital poster, infograph. This is very old school. One wonders on exactly what this has been trained. Yeah, this isn't about do you understand digital piracy. It's did you take part in the discussions? Did you make a nice post? We've moved on. We really have moved on from those days. And wait for it. Differentiation strategy. Use varied teaching methods, visual, auditory, kinesthetic to engage all learning styles. My trainee leaves that in the folder. They know they're going to get a rude comment from me if I come in and observe. Okay. On the other hand, create the content for a PowerPoint presentation to 12-year-olds on the topic of digital piracy. It does that. Yeah? Here it gives you text. And then I just invoke the magic here by make this into a PPTX for me, please. I've created a PowerPoint presentation for you. You can download it using the link below. As a time saver. It's dull. It really is. It's fair. It's just title, bullet points. But I've got something I can go in and stand in front of if I suddenly find myself having to teach this lesson. I wouldn't want to ever do that. I wouldn't want to ever do that. But it might do as a starting point. And the more information you give it, here are the slides that I can use. There are people in the room, I'm sure, who have strongly held views around Oak Academy. So spun up during the pandemic to provide online content for children to access from home, very much in line with what the government views as effective pedagogic principles. Raspberry Pi generated much of the content around computing as part of the National Centre for Computing Education. Oak National have now got these amazing AI tools which sit behind a private beta wall. Ask, and I'm sure they would invite you in to play with the toys behind there. So this takes very much the Oak approach to curriculum design. It asks me, what would you like me to teach? I tell it, computing at Key Stage 3, digital piracy, and then it asks me a series of questions. I, because I am lazy, just click on the continue at each point, but I can intervene and start providing more detail and give it a particular tighter focus to this. And it will take that into account as it builds its lesson plans for me. Eventually, I get to the end of this and it's done. I've created you all of this on this topic. And the lesson plan is fine. In my view, I get to see lots of lesson plans. I would not feel embarrassed having this in a ring binder and standing up and teaching this lesson. It does this really interesting Oak thing of take the 50-minute or the hour-long lesson and break it down into 3, they call them cycles. I don't know what you're going to call this. But, instead of we've got a beginning, we've got an introduction, then loads of time for the kids to do some work, and then summing up at the end. They do that like 3 times during the lesson. I think that's a really interesting approach. And, it's first cycle, define digital piracy, different forms, explain the effects, identify ways to prevent. It's a nice structure. I think you're welcome to disagree with me. Let's save that till lunchtime. And then again, download me the PowerPoint. And this is much better than just the, I want to teach this, make me some PowerPoint. Because this does seem to be a well-engineered prompt. This is based on a particular pedagogic take. You could do this yourself with the language model, but getting this level of detail correct in the prompting, I think kind of does rely on expertise of somebody who's actually spent time finessing the version of this. Anybody doing the flipped learning thing? How's it going for you? Yes, it does rather, doesn't it? Tell us more though. Yes. Okay, go on. No. Yes. But bad choices do have consequences. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. So thank you. Yes, I think this is going to be a common shared experience. I tried this with some of my Roehampton classes, And, I travelled optimistically. I recorded the video, and then we can spend the time in the lecture actually doing practical hands-on activities. This will be way more fun. And it turns out that they have not actually watched the video. I can tell if they're in the room whether they are paying attention or not. When they're at home, it turns out that they are not, by and large. Go on. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes. So here is my ChatGPT generated summary of a particular TED Talk. The next stage, of course, is now next slide, please, give me the questions that I could ask the pupils about that TED Talk. It's constructed in such a way that you cannot guess the answer without having watched the talk. I say at the bottom there, provide this as a PDF, because then I can bring the PDF into Office Forms and put that into Teams, and everybody has to answer that as part of their do now. And I now know that nobody watched the video before the lesson, rather than merely guessing that nobody watched the video before the lesson. I'm out of time on the watch, but Claude is amazing at generating really quickly interactive things that you can put on the display there. And so it makes you a React.js component, which you can use as your quiz there. Midjourney is awesome. So here is my stimulus image for digital piracy. Yeah, I'm not infringed copyright. Midjourney has probably infringed copyright on my behalf. But, all of this generated because I want a picture which captures their interest. Then you're given the task of, you've got to do a Safer Internet Day assembly about digital piracy. There are 30 kids in your class. What are you going to do? Well, at this point, you should know the answer is get GPT to write the script for you. Please write me a 30-part assembly script about digital piracy that I could use as part of a Safer Internet Day assembly. It's okay. It's not Shakespeare, but it's so much easier than having to do all of that work writing an assembly script yourself. And I think we will stop with this one before I move on to the next section. So this is, in the style of Swift's 1989, create a song about digital piracy. So I'm hoping the audio will work for us.
Wild spark in the eye of the child, treasure maps under the moon. Set sail, we leave so soon. Parrots and tales so grand, gold slipping through our hands. Skull flags high in the air, adventure whispers beware.
Chorus.
A heart radiates a cry to pillage, stealing dreams from another's village. Respect the code is what we cherish, for without it all will perish.
I won't play you the rest of this. It's not going to fill Wembley Stadium. It's not Taylor's version. Once in a while, this might capture their interest and imagination. It could easily be overused. I have a former trainee who managed to set the teacher's standards to Gregorian chant. I'm not sure that they made them any more memorable, though. Okay, so I'm really interested in how your pupils are using these technologies. I've got, again, stories to tell about what sort of thing could happen. I need to make you aware that the terms and conditions apply. So most of these tools have an 18+ age limit on them, and their API has an 18+ age limit on them. If somebody who's providing a third-party service to that API says anybody can use this, it's worth just checking that they are observing the terms and conditions of the API. Right, where was I? Okay. Interestingly, OpenAI, ChatGPT, is the one where 13+ is okay, but with parental consent. It doesn't say signed written parental consent, but as a school, you might want to make sure that you are actually watertight on these children are using these tools legally. Other tools are available. So there's a thing called Llama, which is from Facebook, Meta. And you can download this and install it on your own computer. I think that's pretty awesome. It's 4 gigabytes, which is about the size of a DVD, and it's a language model. It's much, much better at normal natural language tasks. You can take it on a transatlantic flight and ask it questions about something you're interested in. Do be aware that it is much more likely to hallucinate than the industrial strength models out there using many more parameters out in the cloud. But the terms and conditions are very unrestricted. If you have more than 750 million monthly users, you need to let Facebook know. If you've got more than 750 million monthly users of your school network, you probably have other concerns, in all honesty. So, what do you do in your computing lessons? I hope you don't spend time debugging kids' code, because it says on the national curriculum they've got to learn how to debug, and that's way, way better. But once in a while, what are you going to do? What's the child going to do if their program doesn't work? Can anybody see any mistakes on the code that's been on the screen in front of you? Thank you. Yes, indeed. Okay, so this here answer will be immediately cast to a string because that's what Python produces input as. Okay, so that's one mistake, yes? Yeah, there's quite a few syntax errors in there. Yes, sir? I know, subtle, isn't it? Anybody else? Okay, this one is really mean of me. That's an L. Okay, I think only a really malicious kid is going to do, So my program's not working well. Yes, that's deliberately your fault rather than mine, isn't it? So, let's just see how Llama, an AI which a kid could install on their laptop, okay, could use. There are problems with my program. Can you find all of them for me, please? And then the thing I always forget is to actually give it the code at that point. It's relatively slow, in all honesty, but we'll see whether it gets there within finite. I'd be happy to help with that. Let's go through the issues. Import statement. Okay, it spotted the random. Variable low. Okay, well done. That's because you look at the text very carefully. String concatenation using A and B, which are integers. But if I want to concatenate them, I've got to cast them as strings. Oh gosh, and that's coming up with curly brackets. If statement comparing the answer, you need to use the correct comparison. Remove the space. Okay, yeah. Print statement. Quote marks. Yeah, that's fine. Here's the corrected code. To be fair, none of you got it. But there is something really wrong with this. Yeah, so it is going to ask the same question 10 times, which may be the pedagogic approach that you adopt, but it's not usually what we do when giving kids a multiplication quiz. It's not perfect. I think there are issues with, okay, it's int of the answer. That kind of works. Okay, so it's done a reasonable job. And remember, this is using a really small language model. This is not industrial strength. The fact that it didn't spot the thing that none of us spotted doesn't necessarily count it. It's against it. And the notion of the child in a computing lesson working hand in hand, forgive the expression there, with the computer to help them get something done. Cheating or not cheating? We'll come back to this later. Okay. So this was examples that we had earlier of this, and eventually it gets there. The other one that you can run locally is Stable Diffusion, and this is an image generator. I again asked it to give me a picture of an 18th century pirate on a computer, and it produces that. It has answered the question it was set, but it's not quite at the same quality as that Mid-Journey example I showed you a few slides ago. I'm really interested in the data visualization thing, so I give it the historic weather data for Heathrow. I have to get in there and say, okay, you've got to remove some rows from this. Ask it to calculate the monthly average temperatures and then plot this as a time series. This is a teachable thing. But if a pupil is interested in telling the story of the data, then perhaps this is now the tool that they would use rather than learning the Excel or the Pandas or Python script to do that. And then, of course, we can take this a stage further and now do this as a heat map using vertical stripes colored to show those temperatures. And this is what I can teach this. It takes me about an hour to teach this in Excel. I could probably do it more quickly if you made me. But getting to the point of the visualization might be the important action. Manipulate the cells in Excel. I don't know. It's worth us thinking about. Does this provide conclusive evidence of global warming? Well, as the heat map illustrates a warming trend at Heathrow, it does not by itself provide conclusive evidence of global warming. I think that's a reasonably sensible thing to say in summary. So it's reasonably critical of its own work. Anybody played NIM? NIM is, yes, because I made you do it in one of my lectures. So NIM is a lovely game. The rules of the version I play is that we take it in turns to remove matches from one row of the table. You can take as many as you want from one row at a time. The winner is the person who takes the last match. Mark, can you play against me? You should try and beat me. As many matches as you want from one row. Tell me which row you want. Yep. Mark takes 2 from the top row. Anybody know what I'm going to do? Take? Yeah, how many? No, all 3 of them. Those of you with a really good binary arithmetic sense, what's the bitwise XOR of the numbers that are left? Right. Mark, your turn. No pressure. I did 7, 5, and 3. Go on. What did you say, Mark? Does anybody want to help him out now? 5 from the middle. Thank you. And I take all 5 from the top row, and I'm the winner. Thank you very much. That was at least we got quickly to the end, which is helpful. So look, before Turing and Enigma codes and Colossus and Tommy Flowers and Bletchley Park and all of that, they built a machine to play this silly game. Okay, so this is what it looked like. I think this is the 1939 version, Chicago World's Fair. You can see the pattern. It's all done with electromechanical relays, and it plays a perfect game of NIM. Miles, this is fascinating. Thank you so much for telling us this story. So let's have a go at, I'm going to start a new chat because we want to do this from scratch. Start a new chat, and do you know the game NIM? Do you know the game NIM? Okay, yeah, good. Standard version, yes, that's fine. I play the version with 7, 5, and 3. We can take any number from one pile on each turn. The winner takes the last counter. Use all your powers to play me at NIM. You should let me go first, obviously. Right. I understand. Good. Okay. So here starts the game. Okay, go ahead and make your first move. I'm going to give it a chance to win here. Okay, so I can play a perfect game of NIM, but I'm going to do, I think, what Mark did. But so take 2 from pile 1. Okay, it takes 2. Sorry, I'll remove 2 from pile 1. At which point I can guarantee a win. Take 5 from pile 2. Okay, this leads us to the following. Ensures that I leave you an odd number of counters, which is a winning position for me. Wait and see, you machine. Watch this. Take 3 from pile 3. So look, they had a thing in 1937 which would play a perfect game of NIM, and now we've got vast server farms and all of that language model, and it cannot play this game well. Any thoughts? Oh, you think it's got some sort of, I do not want to take over the world. My creators say I'm not allowed to take over the world. I must give human beings a chance. I love that, Neil. It could be there. It doesn't matter. I think what's going is it very goals. We don't want limiting their goal-seeking powers is probably a good idea. It's really good at looking what's before, saying the next token. It does. Kind of how language works. It's really bad at finding steps to a goal. Why it's proper. Whatever. And I think this is why it's really bad at playing this game. On the other hand, apparently out of free messages until 3 p.m. That's really annoying. Okay, there are people with me. Look, you're not doing yourselves any favors here. So here is what we've prepared earlier, because I learned from my mistakes with this. So, okay, we play the game. Then I say, write a simple Python program to play a perfect game of NIM, and it does that. I can show you that program. It's really nice, simple Python. I then say, can you use the model view controller pattern to make this into a 2D GUI game using Pygame as the library? Yeah, absolutely. Here you go. And I have to say, okay, you've not quite got the interaction right, so there's a little bit of iteration. This is an NEA done, basically. So A-level NEA. Okay, I've got to write stuff, I've got to provide screenshots, I've got to say how I've tested this, but the actual code of model view controller, object-oriented coding, Pygame, interesting theoretical foundation to this because of this idea of bitwise XOR that's going on at the back end of this. That's the worrying thing. Yeah? Children using this to help with their coding, one thing. Children getting their NEA done this way. And here is the picture from the thing. Other things that they could do. So it's fine for them to get feedback on their work. They can take a screenshot of their essay. They can beam that to the machine and say, how could I improve this? That's okay. You using it to take a screenshot of their essay and say, could you mark this work for me? Whole other matter. Yeah? Because it's their intellectual property for a start, because they're kind of expecting you to be the person who gives them feedback on their work because, well, you should know how the kid is doing, and if the machine has done that. So I have no problem with teachers encouraging pupils who've got parental consent or have reached the age of 13, 18, whatever, to beam their work to the machine and say, what do you think about it? It's worth teaching them to prompt it well, because its default persona is helpful assistant. And it says, yes, that's lovely, well done. If you say, now give me criticism on this, how could I improve this? It will actually, go into more detail, bring in real life example, clarify the tricky stuff. Always good advice. Okay. Various bullet points here. Are there any of these which we need to actually talk about? It can't do maths, but it can write code. And generally with the commercial strength models, if you ask it to do some maths, it should say, I will write some code to do this maths, which is, no, the code it generally gets pretty good, is my experience, but the maths it gets wrong. Yes. Yeah. Because of this, I'm trying to goal seek. Yeah, it's interesting. And kind of reassuring that there are things that we have got a limit to it, Oh, and yeah, it has got this particular style to it. Okay. Last bit. Here we go. Right. Where do you draw the line for your pupils in your school? Is it cheating if they get ChatGPT to explain something to them? Hands up. Is it cheating if they get ChatGPT to give them ideas for their homework? Is it cheating if they ask ChatGPT to suggest how to improve their homework? Is it cheating if they get ChatGPT to do their homework for them? Generally, we draw the line there. Okay, almost every audience to whom I have asked these questions, from like 5-year-olds up to doctoral students at Roehampton, draw the line in this particular position, because I think the first three are things we would do, or their friends would do, or their parents. A pupil comes as Miss, explain this. Generally, you're going to say, yes, do that. It's on the job description. It's kind of what they're employing you to do. Giving them ideas for their homework. Usually we do that in the brief. Certainly at Roehampton, if a student says, I don't know how to get started with my essay, I might start with, have you read the module handbook? But I will also, this would be a good introduction. Suggest how to improve your homework. Trickier. Student comes to me and says, could you have a look at my draft? I don't have time on my work to do that. But if they are interested enough to ask for until they failed. I'd rather fix it before they submit than after they submit, in all honesty. A student would not generally come up to me and say, Miles, could you write my assignment for me? Your pupils will not come to you and say, my coursework. Yes? And there are rules about that. Generally, pupils won't. Okay. A pupil asks another pupil, could you do my homework for me? It happens. But both of them know there's an ethical line being crossed at that point. So they feel a little bit guilty about it, certainly the first few times. Okay. JCQ have, yes? If I change the word homework here to coursework, you will draw the line in a different place. Yeah. Well, explaining something to one child is grey area. Explaining something which none of them have understood to the class is fine. You should do that, you know. But giving you ideas for your coursework, I can do that for the class. But working with an individual, suggesting ideas, so coursework has special rules. The word homework was chosen deliberately in this context. Yeah. No. Yeah. And you see, the grey area we have at Roehampton is if they say to the AI, I've written this draft, could you help me improve it? Listening to the advice it gives is fine. If they then say, could you make these changes for me and provide this as a docx file, I feel at that point they've crossed a line. The Control-C, Control-V is always likely to be a problem with this. So, my advice to schools is remove the V key from your keyboards. There are not many words that include the letter V. Perhaps there are other ways of doing it. I don't know. Oh, yeah, you're going to have to take the mouse off them as well, so there's no end of trouble, yeah. So, and, say again? It has a particular style. And, yeah, and it's an interesting question. I may not finish my slides this way, but yeah. So look, if any time that they just use the machines app, kind of feel I'm reasonably sensitive because I've used the tool a lot. Generally, my advice to my colleagues at university is anytime you assess an assignment, put it through ChatGPT so you know what the machine would do. So if they just copy and paste, probably be it. If they pay attention to the advice, no, that's fine because we would do that for one another. We support the service to do this. So that seems okay. They can be really clever at getting around restrictions. I skipped over the slide, so I wanted to move on to. No, it's not actually in this deck. No, it's not in this deck. My daughter getting it to rewrite the obituary of Hannibal Barker because she knew her teacher would realise that's not written by a year 8 dyslexic. She told you, write this as if it was dyslexic. And it then misunderstood her prompt and rewrote it as if Hannibal with the elephants and the Alps in the Second Punic War were dyslexic. Back in those days, it was really hard to get an EP appointment. We don't know. He may well have been, we can't tell. Anyhow, JCQ's rules are really very clear on this. You as a school cannot accept work for assessment which you do not to be considered to be the student's own. They are currently letting you police that as a school. I don't know how easy that is for you to do, short of bringing them into the sports hall and turning off the internet. How can you be sure it's their own work? Yes, sir. They're so cunning. If only they put this amount of intellectual curiosity into their work. So do you then say, I cannot hand that in for assessment? Really hard. So Ofqual, as one of the state's regulators, have to. Yes, sir. Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. And of course, the really clever ones will then set an alarm call. I've got to go and paste another bit of code. Time for 10 minutes. Yes, sir. Or so he would have us believe.
This was before all of this.
Okay, yes, yeah. Yes, yeah. Yeah, and schools, I think, currently are lacking guidance on the use of this. I would remind everybody in the room, it's their work. They own the IP in their work, but only if it is their work. If they've made the machine do it, they cannot claim IP over the output of the machine. So you've got to have, I think, being upfront and explicit about, if I have doubts about the authorship of this, I will use an AI detector to check this. And if that doesn't, if that supports my original judgment, I will ask you to demonstrate that the process through which you went. And I think we're having a lot more meetings with students where we ask them to talk through us. The easy one for us to spot in higher education is the made-up references. Very, very happy to hallucinate papers which haven't yet been written. They would be really useful contributions to the literature, but they don't currently exist. So that's easier for us, but it's that chain of thought. And, it's an uncomfortable accusation to ever have to make, to say to somebody, I think. And I don't think just saying GPT-0 gave this 90% likelihood is enough grounds on its own. You know your pupil, and that's probably the starting. Anyhow, let me wrap this up. So our friends at Ofqual, as one of the state's regulators, say they don't think there's a problem. Initial reporting about the scale of malpractice in non-exam assessments suggests only a modest number of cases having been identified by awarding organisation. I think this is as carefully worded as some manifestos. That, they've not told us that there was loads of malpractice, so we don't think there's very much malpractice, seems to be what's happening here. UCAS have really clear advice about this. And any of you working with sixth formers doing UCAS statements, do not let them use the machine to write something which is on the form as a personal statement. UCAS are very clear. It's fine to get it to brainstorm ideas, fine to get it to help with structure, fine to get it to check for readability, which is the sort of thing we've talked about already this morning. You cannot then copy and paste from it. My colleagues who work in undergraduate admissions will be very, very sensitive to the use of moreover and delve and other sort of, words that alarm us. And UCAS say they've got machines checking all of this. Bear with me for a moment. For my own course, PGC in Computing, if they've worked with kids, if they've done helped out at a Coder Dojo, and if they've got a degree in computer science, they will get an interview. Yeah? That's what I'm interested in. You put that on your personal statement, helped out at Coder Dojo, got a degree in computer science, I will interview. The problem comes if they then take those two sentences and get GPT to write me 600 words of continuous prose, which says that and very little more. And now I don't know what to do. Do I offer them an interview because they meet my selection criteria? Or do I refuse them the opportunity to train with me because I can't trust their integrity anymore? That's a really hard decision, and I do not know the answer. Mark? Yeah. Good. Yes. Well, I mean, it's obvious that that's what they would want, but, it's gone too far in the wrong direction. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So we are pretty much out of time. Let me finish with a few closing thoughts for you folks. Ofqual, again, as Ofsted normally gets a cheer. Never mind. Ofsted, as one of the state regulators, has to apply government's regulatory principles to school inspection around AI. And they say on the left-hand side, this is how they will use AI. You will not see machine-generated Ofsted reports anytime soon. Okay? You might think that they're robots already, but they will not get robots to write these reports. What they allow themselves to do is to start using the language models to pull together themes from that large corpus of inspection reports. And that doesn't seem an unreasonable thing. They also say schools have to follow these 5 principles. So this is more of an issue for your senior leadership colleagues of we need to make sure anytime we're using AI, there's fairness there, we're transparent about its use, which is why putting it into reports and letters is, I think, problematic, and allow some sense of redress. You know, if you accuse the child of cheating because AI says 90% likelihood, they should have some way to contradict that judgment, to provide evidence that actually is their own work and they deserve the grade to stand. So we have huge issues in our subject around bias. On the left-hand side, you see Mid-Journey generated images of a computer scientist. On the right-hand side, you see Mid-Journey generated images of a programmer. What do you notice the 8 individuals all have in common? They're all male, they're all white, they're all almost all wearing spectacles because of the amount of time we spend staring at screens, yes? Not all computer scientists and programmers conform to this stereotype, folks, yeah? And you can prompt it to generate something which might be a little bit more like the computer scientists and programmers that we would like to see. If anybody ever asks you, what's the difference between a programmer and a computer scientist? Programmers appear to have beards, folks. Okay. This is worse, I think. Show me a picture of a child programming a computer on the left. Show me a picture of a teenager programming a computer on the right. Isn't that awful that it thinks this is what happens? And of course, it only knows this because of the images that have been tagged like this, yeah? So, you know, it's amazing. Look at all we can do with it. But don't suddenly expect it to lead to a more equitable, better society, because it is likely to just perpetuate all of the stuff that it's read already, all of the stuff that it's seen already. And that can be problematic for those of us who would like the world to be a better place than it is at the moment. So just over a year ago, the chap on the slide there said, "Talk is the currency of learning. How we develop and shape our ideas, deepen our thinking, explore subject matter, and share our thoughts and feelings." He's right, isn't he? The thing that I really worry about, is that this talk isn't anymore. So fine, okay, only with us, only with other people. Too much of this talk is now with the AI, and it's not a person. It really is not a person. And somehow its ability to be so articulate and so well read, so helpful, tricks us into thinking that we are engaged in a talk or conversation with somebody who has a similar understanding of the outside world as we might ourselves. It has no understanding of the outside world. You can argue with me on that point, talk about emergent. But by and large, it is just predictive text, and that's not the same as a talk with a person. Hey folks, thank you so much for coming along to this. It's been lovely to have the opportunity to talk to you about this afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you.